welcome to Castle of Horror, the show dedicated to horror movies and awesomeness. This week, we kick off a retrospective on the Alien films with the 1979 film Alien. This is episode 326 from Denver, Colorado. I'm your host, Jason Henderson, publisher at Castle Bridge Media. With me from Austin is Tony Savaggio, tech director at Rooster Teeth, lead singer and bassist of the band Deserts of Mars, and lead guitarist of the band Rise from Fire. Say hello, Tony.
Howdy.
Howdy. Also in Austin, Mr. Drew Edwards is the writer-creator of the long-running underground comic Halloween Man, currently published by Comixology. He is a Best Writer Ringo nominee, Austin Chronicle Best of Austin Award winner, and a member of the PEN America Fellowship. Say hello, Drew.
Right.
And finally, also in Denver, color commentary for the one and only Julia Guzman of Guzman Immigration of Denver. Say hello.
Hello.
Hello. Bear in mind, if you haven't seen today's movie, we're going to be talking about it from the perspective of horror fans who have seen it, so warning, spoilers ahead. Alien is a 1979 science fiction horror film directed by Ridley Scott, written by Dan O'Bannon. It follows the crew of a commercial space tug, Nostromo, who encounter the eponymous alien, an aggressive and deadly extraterrestrial set loose on the ship. It's got a heck of a cast, and it's not a very big cast. It's got a big cast, but they're all heavy hitters. Tom Skerritt, Sigourney Weaver, Veronica Cartwright, Harry Dean Stanton, John Hurt, Ian Holm, and Yaphet Kotto. This thing is a cultural. This is a beachhead for a cultural phenomenon. This thing spawned movies and other films and comic books and novels and just a plethora of just stuff. And I think even more than that, I think it is like Norman Bates, and it just became part of our cultural vocabulary. So let's get our opening thoughts on the original Alien. I would love to hear in your opening thoughts whether you saw the theatrical version this time or whether you watched the director's cut. And I have no idea really what the difference is. And then also whatever you want to say about this 1979 thriller. So let's do Tony, Julia, Drew, and then I'll go. Tony, opening thoughts, Alien.
I mean, this is a film with such significance to both horror and sci-fi. It's so well documented and storied. It feels like both something we have been long waiting to do, and also, holy crap, I hope we can bring something new to it. Through our perspectives. I didn't see this film until way later on VHS, even later than I might have, because my stepbrothers had been brought to the theater way sooner than any kid should see this movie. I don't know. I forgot how old they were, but yeah, they should have been in theater. And they just told me how scary it was and how horrifying, and they couldn't sleep and all this stuff. So I just thought this movie was an impenetrable scare fest, and it is really creepy, really scary movie, intense. I might have, and I can't remember, I might have even read the novelization before I saw the movie. It's possible. And the novelization is great because, again, like I've said before, the cool thing about novelizations of the time was there was no director's cut.
Right.
You could access readily. In fact, you may not even hear about a director's cut if you weren't in the know because of the way magazines were, early 80s. But the novels often had to come out at the same time. So all of the director's cut stuff that's in the actual director's cut, which is what I watched this time, was in the novel. So we can kind of discuss some of those things, but
that's really interesting. Wow.
Same with Aliens. All the director's cut stuff that's in Aliens, the beginning part, the drones, all of those bits were in the novelization because, and that, I had a bunch of stuff like that. Crawl, of all things, has all these bits in it. And I used to just collect and read those novels because we didn't get a VCR for a long time.
And Alan Dean Foster wrote that novelization.
I
knew that without looking it up, but I can see it now that he did. Yeah.
And so, I read a lot of these, and that was the only way to replay a movie if you didn't have a theater close to you or have, access to, I guess at the time, beta first and then VHS. So I read and reread all these novelizations that I had. I mean, I even had the novelization to Annie, the movie.
Really?
Because I would just collect, and you could get them at half price book style places. There was
And
one.
you don't still. So do you still have a lot of those novelizations? Like, did you?
I think so. My parents shipped me a bunch. I had to go back and look what's in the box because they're in boxes right now because they're really old. Not moldy, but they smell like old books.
Sure.
So
Yeah.
Rain's like, you gotta get the old book smell out before they come into the house and make the whole house smell like old book. So yeah, but this is a fantastic movie, top to bottom. It's near perfect in my opinion. For horror and for sci-fi, and there's a reason why it stuck with us all this time and why people rip it off all the time.
Yeah.
It's a masterclass in leading the viewer, and there's just so much to it. I can't wait to get into it, but I it's okay to not like it, but I think you'd be hard pressed to find somebody who didn't at least go, you know what, I don't like this movie, but this and this is good, even if you hated it. But in general, most people, once you see it, you go, wow.
Mm-hmm.
Set design, actors, setup, everything is just near perfection, in my opinion.
Yeah. Wow. That's a heck of a start. Julia, so Alien, I think I heard you say that you weren't even sure if you'd actually ever seen this film all the way.
Yeah, I didn't remember seeing it from start to finish because I know I've seen Aliens, but Alien I've just seen scenes of. I don't remember seeing the whole thing. I agree with Tony that it is near perfect and very. It's just so beautiful to look at, like the set design. I just kept being completely in awe that every single detail of every single shot is designed to perfection. It's really gorgeous. The only complaint I had was that I really hated that Sigourney Weaver was wearing those panties that were way too small for her. I was like, why?
Yeah.
So irritating. It just really bugged me. But no, there's only a few little spots here and there where I was a little lost, where I'd kind of be like, wait, what's going on? But it's brilliant. It's so scary, so well done. The creature is fantastic and extremely memorable. The acting is fantastic. It's just really, really good, surprising in at every turn. It was down to Sigourney Weaver and Meryl Streep. I'm trying to imagine what this movie would have been like with Meryl Streep in it instead.
Man, what a different career Meryl Streep would have had if she had been in this too.
Maybe, but she's done a lot of stuff that's kind of, different from, I don't know. I think she'd still be her. she'd still be amazing. But, anyway, I just, I think it's, that's it. It's just really, really, really solid. It holds up great.
So you did not see it in the in the 80s?
I don't think so. I feel like I would remember having seen it then.
So awesome. Drew, what about you? I mean, opening thoughts. Like, do you have a thesis that you want to throw out there? And also, did you watch, everybody check in because I didn't hear from Tony. Did you watch the director's cut?
Tony said he watched the director's cut, but we watched
Okay,
I think I watched the director's cut. The Blu-ray that I have has both, but it's been the two cuts are starting to blur to me. So we may suss out which version I watched.
Yeah, we had to read about what the difference was to see which one we were watching, and we decided to watch it.
It's so subtle that it's difficult.
Yeah,
but Drew, did you see the part with Dallas at the end?
What, the kill me?
Yes.
Then that's what okay. Gotcha.
Okay. That was not in the version we saw. So we saw the theatrical.
Okay. First of all, what a few weeks we're having, because last week we did RoboCop and now we're doing Alien. So we're doing two iconic movies back to back. So that's exciting. I like this movie a lot. I don't know if I like it as much as RoboCop, because RoboCop, it might be perfect. This is pretty close to perfect. There's a few things that I don't like about it, which we will get into, but this is a very influential movie. I saw it in kind of a weird way as a kid, because I saw Aliens with my dad, and when you're seeing that as a kid, that might as well, it's done in such a way that might as well be the first film, even though it's a sequel to this movie. So it didn't. I saw that one first, and then I had to go back and watch this movie to get kind of like the context. So this almost felt like a prequel because of how I was introduced to it. But it's funny. I feel like the two movies complement each other very very well, and like they're good extent. Like Aliens is certainly a good extension of this universe, but they're also very different because this is a very somber, spooky. If a movie set in outer space can be spooky, this is it. You know, definitely kind of like a more of a, you know, it's got like aspects of like a slasher movie and like a haunted house movie. It's definitely not like, it's funny, like in a lot of ways it is like your classic monster movie, but it's the way it's staged, and the level of thought that they put into this organism, like the way this organism functions, it, you know, kind of elevates it from being just a run-of-the-mill B movie.
Oh yeah.
And there's tons of stuff about this movie that aesthetically got ripped off. Like, you know, the use of the flamethrowers alone. Like, how many monster movies after this came out had like people running around with like flamethrowers? And it's as near as I can tell, that trope started here. And it seems like a silly thing to point out, but it's absolutely a trope that like became very pervasive in the 80s and 90s. And, you know, it's just that, but like the performances, the look of this movie, which we're going to get into, is very interesting to me compared to like other science fiction franchises. It's just such a well put together, you know, again, nearly perfect. It seems so like heavy to put that on something, but like it is just excellent from top to bottom. Like everything about it, like just the matte paintings and the miniatures for all the spaceships, all that stuff still looks good, you know, 40 on years later. Like, just an absolute classic.
I'm trying to understand how they managed to get all of the pre-production on this thing so right. When you think about everything that had to be done to look believable as a working whatever the hell it is, from just the walls behind them at all times to what their med bay looks like, to the food, to the sleeping pods,
all the creature effects,
the creatures, and all of that stuff, everything they had to make, all of it. And it is difficult to determine a false step in the entire picture. Well, and that's amazing.
If we're to believe the documentary, you know, we have Jodorowsky's Dune, to the failed Dune project to thank for this. You know, all these people have been working together. That failed, and you know, it wasn't a direct 1-to-1, but
a lot of that work got moved over. I did not understand I didn't pay close enough attention to the Jodorowsky's failed Dune project part of the. You're talking about the documentary Memory, which just came out. No,
just the actual documentary, Jodorowsky's Dune.
Which I haven't seen. Yes.
You have to see that movie. It's something else. It's a great, hey, go watch this after you watch Alien.
All right.
Or before, or, you know, that's part of my endorsements, but it just happens to be, you know, all these people working together, that failed, it's splintered. There's a whole thread that goes to that and Star Wars and a bunch of other stuff. So it's really, but yeah, and you know, we have O'Bannon working on things, and you know, also, you know, had come from Dark Star, which has like it's low budget, but it has a cool aesthetic.
Yeah. Well, I mean, there are several movies in a row that have the. You know what? I should do my own opening thoughts really quickly, which is I saw the theatrical version. I had heard for years about scenes that are in the director's cut, and so I probably should watch the director's cut, but we watched the theatrical, and it is so good looking. I mean, the whole thing it looks so great, and so it sounds like the first topic is just going to be on the mise en scène of this film. But before we get into that, I really loved just the texture of it, you know, and down to the way the characters are interacting. I love how much they're talking all over one another at the dinner table, and you know, how they're bitching about their pay and all the class stuff, how the officers and, you know, the scientists are kind of like always banding together. And so you have, you know, Rosencrantz and Guildenstern down here working on the engine and whining to one another about their bonus.
And working in tech and having to solve problems and stuff.
Yeah.
Like this time around that I watched that, I was like, man, do I feel
Yeah, and also,
I got
how
you.
come people are not listening to Yaphet Kotto when he is talking the most sense on the ship? Like
Well, we know why. I mean, we'll go
Right.
over why, because
Yeah.
he's, and in fact, Rain was asking, like, why isn't this happening? And we find out why. That
Yes.
the things, all the things that make sense, there's a cover for all of it that is plausible up until you
Yeah.
find out the real reason for things.
That's a very good point.
Not
Yeah.
only is it a Creature in the House movie, it's also a mystery.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a sci-fi, it has all these sci-fi elements and classism, etc.
Yes.
Talking about the class stuff, what's fascinating about this and the universe that continues throughout all of the other movies
Yes.
that starts here is that this has got this isn't Star Trek, this isn't Star Wars, this has a very blue collar feel to it, that like, even like the fact that you have a guy wearing like a Hawaiian shirt on a spaceship, like in the people's uniforms, like the officers, they don't look like like a Star Trek uniform. They look like something that was probably bought at like a uniform, like the sort of uniform store that they're very utilitarian but in basic. Like it looked,
everything was
something,
for real.
Well, there's like this really, I guess I'm jumping ahead to the discussion of aesthetic, but like there's this point where they're on, the bridge of the, or the cockpit or whatever, and I notice that like some of the computers are being held together by tape.
Yes.
And that's not a mistake. That's because their equipment is having to be held together by tape because they're coming up with the stuff starts to break down and they're having to figure stuff out on the fly. And I think it's something really, first of all, realistic, but also interesting that that's the direction, because this is only a few years after the first Star Wars, and this is
it's like a year after the first Star Wars, right? And likewise, Star Trek. When did Star Trek the movie come out? Like forgive me, like 78 maybe?
Yeah, I think the fact that they decided to have like this sort of very lived in, very practical again, like it's a sort of kind of a future that I can buy into.
Oh, absolutely.
It's not glossy at all.
You think about
79, by the way, is Star Trek the motion picture.
Yeah.
And also, to that point, there's a sorry, Jason.
No.
When they wake up and they show the consoles waking up, there's a coffee cup that may or may not have had coffee left in it, and ashtray with cigarette butts.
Yes.
Like by the computers. Which
normally
these aren't
just
anybody
these are
who's
Americans. This isn't just like some future people. Like, sure, Captain Kirk is from Iowa, but these people are basically 20th century Americans.
They're us.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like, and I think the fact that this is like, you have this spaceship that isn't the Enterprise, it isn't the Millennium Falcon, it isn't this like pristine mythic thing. It looks like, it really just has this like lived in feel. Like, it immediately puts you in a different mindset. And what I find fascinating about this is that for like some of the flaws that like the sequels have, they were able to kind of maintain this aesthetic and vibe.
Yes.
Even through like some of the bad sequels that came like later. And I think the reason why is that the universe of this is so perfectly encapsulated and shown to us. And
it's sort of completely envisioned. I mean, whatever is not expounded upon is essentially perfectly welcome to be expounded upon in the future, but not necessary to tell these stories. Whatever we get, whatever we need. And I just wanted to say, like, it with Alien in 1979, and also I think like Outland, which is like 18 months later. Those two are both of those movies are full of like dudes in baseball caps and blue shirts, and there's like grease and sawdust and enormous sets of just grunge. And I guess we should say Blade Runner, which came out in 82. Those three really set a it's like you can choose one or the other. You can either have the pristine future of Gattaca and Star Trek and all that stuff, or you can have the sawdust covered future of Alien and all that stuff. And I don't know if it's a failure of imagination or what, but we've never escaped this. I mean, that's sort of where we are even today, as far as, you know, how you choose what your future is going to look like.
Part of that is what we've
The only time,
you know,
the only thing that I think it. Sorry, Tony.
Sorry. Go ahead, and I'll make my point.
Oddly, the only thing that I think that is like kind of in between the two futures might be Futurama, and that's a cartoon.
Right.
But I think we're also coming off of, I think this movie, and I doubt that, you know, Ridley Scott may not agree on this, but I think as far as aesthetics and how we view things, you know, this movie comes after Dirty Harry movies.
Yeah.
It comes after, you know, hard-boiled stuff like that that's very blue collar.
Yeah.
And I think that era of cinema.
Yeah.
That, you know, they going through the 70s and what that looks like.
Why is the 70s a time of discovering fluid? I mean, what is the deal with suddenly things aren't dry? Suddenly there's sweat and grime and fluid and gunk and like
KY jelly.
Yeah, like in this case, they're just smearing. You know, like if you think of them when they're poking at the dead facehugger,
Right.
And we'll work our way through the plot. But they're poking.
I don't
at the
think
dead
it's the
facehugger.
70s. I think it's specifically Ridley Scott just going,
Yeah.
what can I make this, how can I make this look disgusting? So yeah, like I say, he used KY jelly, he used organs of actual animals and blood of actual animals. You know, he used all these organic materials just to get these effects and to create the fear among the cast too. Like a lot of the stuff, they didn't even know that it was going to be organic materials, so they would just be completely horrified, and he would capture that. So
One thing that's a really good point, and in fact, we should probably talk about just major scenes as we work our way through, and so we'll get to the facehugger pretty quickly, but keep that in mind.
Too, that this, you know, this has an aesthetic that's probably that's closer to some older movies too, some almost Hitchcock style stuff where you don't get to the alien part until really far in, as far as horror movies go.
Do you know where the facehugger scene happens? I'm sorry, the I don't know how to put it, the chestburster scene. Spoilers ahead. 1 hour into a 2-hour movie. An hour of character bits, really, basically.
Right. I mean,
that's amazing.
That's a hard sell, and it's also interesting because most people don't remember that.
Yeah,
because it's not just character bits. It's exploring the bizarro planet with the crazy space jockeys, as they call it. You know, that and the all that stuff, and then the facehugger bit is really, I mean, that's pretty amazing.
The big, and in fact, let's talk about. In fact, it strikes me that the best way for us to hit on a lot of other stuff is sort of to get into the plot a little bit. I don't want to spend too much time at the very beginning because we sort of talked about the mise-en-scène, but everybody wakes up. This ship, the Nostromo, is headed back to Earth after they picked up a metric bazillion tons of ore. And so this is the business of the future, is we go mining on other planets with these schmucks who have to like haul all this ore back to Earth. And so they're headed back, and they're going to sleep till they get to Earth.
So it's really smart because it's being refined while they're going back to Earth.
Yes.
It's actually a pretty good setup. Like there's so many forward-thinking sci-fi things in this that it's pretty amazing. Like everything feels very grounded because you go, oh yeah, well of course. Why wouldn't you? Don't just bring the ore back, right? Why don't you make a refinery.
You know, until you said that, I never even noticed that. You're totally right. Yeah. So it's like it's not a big crew. It's like 7, you know, and they've all got jobs. And
talking about the ship though, I think the outside is really cool looking, but doesn't, it looks like, you know, what it is basically, but the inside is so just kind of pristine, you know, even their chambers that they are frozen in, it's like Sleeping Beauty, case with a clear acrylic, and then you've got the room where they go and talk to Mother with all the lights, and it's just all of it is such an interesting design. Like, it's not just one thing. It's not just
there's two. Right, there's the people, like whenever everybody's hanging out together in like a communal area or places where officers work are generally brightly lit with painted white walls and stuff.
Right. And then
but if you are down in a working section, like somewhere that Parker needs to go down and put something together, those places are basically covered in grease and steam.
And they're dark, and it's more like an actual Navy ship or something, I guess. I don't know.
Deep down inside.
It sort of feels like a submarine, is what it feels like.
Yeah,
wow,
exactly.
Well said. Yeah.
Because also there's areas, the other communal areas. So, and it makes sense because if you're asleep all the time, you're not going to get things dirty. That's part of the point.
Yeah.
But there's sections also, you get to one of the areas and there's like pinup magazine pasted everywhere. Yeah. And that's your room when you're not asleep, so you're hanging out.
We don't see individual quarters. Like we don't see if they have Tony, I stepped on you. I'm so sorry. But we don't see where they actually sleep. I think they just didn't build those sets. But like each of these guys probably in theory has their own quarters.
I mean that is one where there's like a living quarter, and you can guess that it's just the way they act. It's probably either Brett or Parker that decided to hang out, because anytime you see one of those guys, they've got a magazine in their hand.
Yeah, it's true.
Work area / sleeping area that's not a stasis chamber.
Well, plus these are mechanics, and if you go to like any machine shop, there's that kind of stuff up on the wall. Like I have a brother-in-law who is a mechanic, and that's what's in his garage.
No, totally. And it makes sense, especially, some of that less now perhaps, but definitely 79. Oh yeah. Like there's, the only thing missing is a pinup calendar.
Yeah.
And the only reason why that's not there is because it would be useless because you're in stasis the whole time.
Yeah.
Who needs a pinup calendar, right? But magazines, sure. But all of the areas that, and they make it a point at the beginning when they're moving the camera through the ship before they wake up, where there's papers flying that weren't secured before, just because like why we'll clean up that later or whatever.
Right.
That kind of stuff. And like I said, there's a coffee cup and an ashtray in the middle of, and that'll drive people who work with computers crazy.
Yeah.
I know. I'm like, oh man, I know why, but geez, don't put the coffee cup and the ashtray near the computer.
The computer console. And these consoles are not like the kind that you just, unplug a USB drive. These are like built-in consoles.
Again, I am fascinated as well because this became the aesthetic.
Yeah.
But when you see a movie like this, and there's some really cool what amounts to CG, there's a really cool computer graphics of terrain and such like that. But they're envisioning what that would look like.
Yeah.
Without all the stuff we have now, like LiDAR and all the stuff that we could use. And so what's awesome is to look at this. What does the future look like to 1979?
Yeah.
And even more amazing is there's an Alien Isolation game, which I was playing, and then it got way too it stresses me out. The game's really good, but the AI is brutal.
Huh.
Alien will find you. It's super scary. But they chose to make all of the monitors in the game these green and blue text monitors. So the whole game, even though it was done a few years ago, has the aesthetic of what does the future look like to 1979 or maybe to 1981 or 2. And so those choices that they made in that game were just pitch perfect. It's a great game, but boy, I was stressed out at work, and then I would come home and start to play it. I'm like, I don't want to be stressed out. It's done so well. I mean, kudos to the team. But I quit for a while because it wasn't fun to be constantly chased by this alien.
I can imagine. You can get that on Steam, apparently. So.
Yeah. I mean, it's usually it's on most every console, and it's usually really cheap now for whatever. They've sold so many copies, I guess. I don't know. But I love that aesthetic of this is what because it's so grounded within the world, nobody questions it, and they're not rattling off like, use, computer, blah, blah, blah. I mean, there's some of the stuff with Mother that's looks a little arcane as far as how they're asking questions. But
Mother is pretty damn sophisticated. When the user experience of this computer understands casual language. It's extremely smart. I mean, so that he can just make
Google.
stuff up. There's no syntax at all to the way they talk to this computer.
Right.
And
also, it's pretty. It's something I hadn't thought about until I saw it again, and it's things I notice and then you forget and then you notice again. But in the discussion, they make sure that not everyone has it. It is the thing that runs the whole ship.
Yeah.
And so interfacing with Mother is something that at first only Dallas can do, and then Ripley can do, but the protocols to get into the hive of the ship, the thing, Mother runs everything, is, several security features. And they've thought about this as well. There's a handle and a chip and a fingerprint. You don't just go in and start asking the main part of the ship questions or messing with it. And it's just so full of stuff like that just makes sense. Is so well planned, and that's why it holds up. But also, like I said, because nobody questions it, because everything fits within the world, you rarely have those moments of like, oh look, that's so archaic. Because it doesn't, even though you kind of know that it doesn't bug you in the same way that if somebody goes, oh, that's a 32 megabyte blah blah blah.
Yes, right. They're not
making
up. I mean, somehow a movie like stuff about like the internet from the early 90s is full of stuff that's instantly dated. But this is not really like that. They're not, they don't, there's a lot of tech talk that's in the background while they're just jabbering at one another, but none of it stops you up because none of it is really instantly familiar. This thing feels
I think it's
so
because
real.
the plot doesn't hinge on
right
the way their computer screen looks like which hell, for all we know, like that's the way computers had to look in the future for some reason.
Right, exactly.
Like,
maybe
there could
green
be some
screen,
reason why it went back to those more primitive looks, because this is a utilitarian, universe, and who the hell needs fancy graphics anyway? But
I can live with that. That's the Star Wars theory too. Is in the future. The new Star Wars movies, they still use the same green graphics that they had.
What we do know is that every company, in order to save cost, will get the cheapest freaking computer parts that they can.
Yes.
This is a given. Also, the same reason that our current Social Security and unemployment computers were all across the board swamped and had to get people with very specific, middle-aged and older people.
Yeah, there's a billion 8088s running the
because there was there were errors in how the number of people coming into unemployment made it.
I never think about the way the computer screens look when I go back and watch this movie, though, because I'm so enthralled with the way everything else is put together. Mm-hmm. I mean, to me, thinking about that would just be thinking about oh, well, Tom Skerritt's hairstyle looks really, late 70s, early 80s, and I don't think about that when I'm watching that, because first of all, who knows the way fashion is in the future, and this isn't a movie about that. It's about look at how lived in and believable this is, which it is. And I know the problem with the two more recent entries in this film franchise is they started to kind of get away from both Prometheus and Alien Covenant got a little too slick, and because of that, people were calling it out on it looking like a departure from the rest of this universe, and I think rightfully so, because everything else does look kind of, warts and all, looks kind of cohesive, because this does such a good job.
Everything feels like it's part of a whole, and that's why it works still.
So all right, so there's two sequences that we should talk about, one after the other. The first one, as we mentioned, they wake up, they're a bunch of blue collar guys, and they're bitching about their bonuses, and that just gives us a feel for the various characters. But they soon discover the reason that they've been woken up is not as they think. They think they've been woken up because they're about to get to Earth, and they don't even bother to check out where they are because they're hungry and they have dinner first. Then they check on where they are and they realize they're nowhere near Earth. Mother, the robot, the computer, the ship's computer has woken them up because they have fresh orders. They're supposed to go check out what is probably some kind of signal. I can't remember if they say they think it's a distress signal.
Yeah, they first think it's a distress signal, and then after they check it out, they learn that's actually a warning, but they don't know that right away because of the...
I don't remember such dialogue being anywhere in the movie, but apparently in the director's cut there's something.
Mother deciphers. Later on, they say Mother deciphered part of it.
Yeah.
Oh, right.
Like a warning.
Yeah,
that's right. That's right. Yes, you're right.
Oh, by the way,
right.
Jason. Also, Ash and Kane probably not Americans.
Right. that's
all
true.
American. I don't. They could be.
I was talking about their
no,
the Hawaiian shirts and the slovenliness and the cigarettes. Just I thought, no, these guys are bros from Dallas. As far as I know, it seems.
Oh my gosh! I just read a thing that's making me super depressed. They're looking at the planet. They go to the planet and they see. And I'm fast forwarding from what you said, but basically right after what you're saying is they get the distress. They go the signal. They go to the planet and they find this large, what's called a space jockey. It's this like
in
skeleton skeleton in a ship in a pilot's seat of a large, very large ship. And that's a big deal that they made this because they wanted to show that they have, this wasn't some little picture. This is like a big budget picture. But so the space jockey sculpture is designed and painted by H.R. Geiger, and he didn't get to finish what he wanted to do. But what made me sad is apparently the prop was burned and destroyed by a burning cigarette left on the model. I'm like,
oh my gosh. Oh my gosh.
Giger, by the way.
Oh, it's
Giger,
not Geiger. Okay.
I've always heard H.R. Geiger. Do you think it's Giger? I've never heard it that way. Anyway, I'll see if
Tony speaks true.
I'm going to look it up because I've never heard it that way.
No, I believe you, but feel free to look it up. But I'm sure that's the case. The what I thought was interesting, though, I think it's Ridley Scott talked about how he wanted to have that. They see the ship. They decide, okay, we're going to go check out the ship. That's where, I don't know. They think the signal's coming from there. They go walk. They get to this giant crescent.
Well, they're contractually obligated to check out any signal that might be intelligent
Parker
life.
Is like Yaphet Kotto of Live and Let Die is like, why are we wasting our time with this? We got a bunch of war. We got to get back to Earth. And the officers are like, no, we have a requirement. We're under contract. We lose our money if we don't check out alien messages, whatever. And as Tony points out, there's also secret shit going on. But
what I think is interesting about this, though, is that, again, this is a sci-fi universe. Alien life, like, they seem like they know that alien life is a thing, but it's not so commonplace that they still don't have like a kind of a wow factor when they come across this stuff.
So, what do we know about this? Because the movie doesn't make it clear at all. Are they familiar with the notion of life on other planets?
They seem to be. It's just it doesn't seem like it's like super commonplace that there is life on it. Like
those super rare, like diamonds, that if you find anything out about it, you got to go check it out, I guess.
And also, they know enough, and we find out a little bit about why later, but the company obviously knows enough that they think that they're going to find this organism. And we find that out later, because, the mystery part of it is, the company knew this all along, and they didn't give a damn about who died.
Right.
Which, in the interest of profits, right? Because whaling economy is not just in the ore business; they're in the the war business, and the probably everything business.
Yes.
Which is the second movie in 2 weeks that we've watched where the company doesn't give a crap who lives or dies.
Yes, they are exactly like those guys.
Yeah.
Look at, unfortunately, the way, hey, what's more important, people or the economy?
Right.
Not just the economy. The economy as
that's our bottom line. Our bottom line.
My economy.
Right.
If you're the shareholder, what's my economy?
Exactly.
Are two different things, and yet, billionaires will tell you have to help the economy, but what they mean is you have to help the stock market.
Yeah, the rich people.
They are bastards.
Rich got to get richer.
Yeah. you're right. This company is very like OCP, but we don't quite know that yet. They seem to be just a level of corporate greed that we're just basically pretty familiar with. You know, so they're like, okay, go check out.
This was increasingly like a theme throughout this era of films, especially science fiction films, is this idea of corporate greed. Although at this point, I don't think it's fair to call it a trope. This is pretty
You mean
early.
How we live also.
Yeah.
But you know what's interesting though too, we don't find that out for a really long time throughout the movie. And
Right.
and Rain watched this with me, and she either hadn't seen it all the way through or hadn't remembered. And so she was asking me throughout, like, oh, why'd they do this? Why? Like, that doesn't make any sense. And you watch, when you don't know, it still makes sense. Okay, you know, because they go down the planet, facehugger thing happens. Ripley's smart enough to go, no, we are quarantining. You get to stay in the airlock, or however they were going to do it. And you know, Ash goes, boop, no, I was listening to the captain.
Yeah.
Alice told me to do this, but it all makes sense.
Right.
And
Everything sounds like the way it's presented.
Yeah, because up until that point, you're like, well, Ripley's the only one who makes any sense in this scenario. And then you realize, oh, well, no, Ash makes sense within his parameters of what he's supposed to do.
And Ash pretends he's like, so Ash, the science officer, who seems to be kind of he's a jerk to begin with.
Yeah.
Very standoffish, always kind of following his own path. And he does let them in after John Hurt gets attacked by an alien on the planet. This crab attaches itself
because
to
he's
his face.
stupid. This isn't another many films that we've watched where scientists behave in a way that I don't believe that scientists would behave in real life.
Well,
Just
in fairness,
stupidly.
this guy isn't actually a scientist.
I think he's like a second in command. What he's like?
Well, no, I'm saying it's later revealed he's an android, and he's
No, we're
No,
talking about
that's
John
about
Hurt.
Ash. I'm talking about John Hurt, who's down on the planet messing with the eggs and touching everything and being like, oh, this is cool. Oh, what does this do? Oh, I poked this thing.
But
oh,
I think that's what I'm like talking about, though. This kind of stuff is still rare enough to where there's a bit of a naivete about coming across alien life. I mean, you're right. He's behaving dumb, and
you know, like no, there's no way he would know that it works because unlike kind of what we see, once we know that there's a face hugger and such, Prometheus to some people didn't make sense, like the snake thing or whatever. But again, I'm going to go that people touch crap that they shouldn't touch all the time.
Oh yeah,
they do.
Scientists reach out and grab things and put their hands in things and swim places and do whatever. People forget.
Well, that's what we were talking about, not necessarily scientists, but explorers, how people will dive into like caves and underwater or climb into tunnels under mountains and be like, well, so what's in here?
Think about how Steve Irwin died, and that is a guy that had lived, being around dangerous animals. People,
you're right.
Can make stupid mistakes.
That's true.
The thing about this whole bit, though, that I found oddly, and it's just a dialogue thing, mind you, but like when they're taking him back to the ship after the facehugger wraps itself around him, and like they're all debating on whether or not he can come back in, and Sigourney Weaver keeps going on and on about like, we have to maintain quarantine, and I'm like, man, that is taken on so much more.
You notice it more now, don't you?
I know, totally.
Watching it now is like, yes. And then the fact that the corporations, again, we're 42 years later, and yet...
I wonder who...
In Colorado, do you know, have you guys heard about this? In Colorado, we have meatpacking plants here just south of Denver. And those corporations got all kinds of waivers to allow their workers to continue working in close proximity. And many of those guys got sick because that meat's got to move. And so, yes, they're just getting one another sick. And the company's like, it's truly the fact that this is in a meatpacking plant is what really really gels the metaphor of just like you're feeding people into a grinder. And just astonishing. So yes, they're not gonna listen to any quarantine. It's really funny though, because you think that Ash is just being maybe a chauvinist. Maybe he's like, well, I only listen to Tom Skerritt. I'm not going to listen to you.
Although
or whatever.
the script wouldn't have you be that, because the script was there were unisex.
Yeah, tell us about that. I forgot about that. Right.
Yeah, the script did not indicate what gender anybody should be, and in fact, the people who wrote the script did not expect that a woman. It didn't even occur to them that Ripley would be a woman. So that's not
which
intended.
Probably does wonders for Ripley's character, as written, because it means that the character is when Ripley corners Dallas to yell at him, and they have this physically intimate, not sexually, but they're just like really close together. They're sort of conferring with one another. There's no sexual tension or anything like that.
Well, I mean, once it gets to the point where they've cast the people, those decisions may have been made. Like at one point they had thought about having a sex scene and all this, but so it's not necessarily at the point where they're directing the characters that they're not intending that, but in the script initially it's not.
It's cool stuff. Anyway, yes, because the plot has to have it happen. It's just brilliant. Tony, to your point, it is super brilliant. They've figured out ways for people to stay in this haunted house with this monster, and because there is a traitor amongst them, all of it will make sense in the end. Because until then, they do continue to make stupid decisions that you only half kind of agree with.
And Parker being the actual thinking about, hey, what are the ramifications? Like, why don't they freeze him? Why don't they freeze you? Why aren't they freezing him? Like
he says that 8 times. Yes.
He's like, hey, just voice of reason over here. Why aren't they freezing him? Right? Any sane person would actually, that would be the first, you know what? We don't know what the hell this is.
Yeah.
But again, it works. It's like a really good mystery. Yeah. In addition to just being a really good haunted house flick.
Yeah.
Sci-fi flick. It's a really good mystery because once you know what happens and you go back and rewatch it, you see how everything makes sense if you know it, and everything goes, oh, when he did this, it gives you away, but I didn't notice it because I wasn't looking for that.
Right.
Like the sleight of hand with Ash throughout it is brilliant as well. And you don't, again, this is a good synergy of actors and directors. It's
very fortunate, isn't it? I mean, it's basically just perfect. Yeah.
And again, the first time I saw it, I'm super surprised. I was younger. Maybe I would be, maybe I wouldn't be now as surprised because you watch enough movies and you go, oh, I thought something was weird about him or whatever. I don't know if I would have, but at the time, look, see, the choices he makes throughout, when are brilliant. And if you don't know, they still look like choices this aloof science officer who thinks he's better than the rest of the crew would make.
Mm-hmm.
And it's done so well.
Go ahead. No,
I was going to say, random tidbit about the company name, by the way, is that the company is named after some of Ridley Scott's neighbors that he hated.
Really? What is the company even called? I've never bothered.
Wayland Yutani. Yeah, Wayland Yutani.
What a boring name for
because it's a conglomerate.
Yes,
style.
It is extraordinarily evil and boring. That's the great thing, is that it's which is so real. It's the banality of evil. Because these are, think forward to Aliens. Maybe when we rewatch it, it won't work as well. But you think about just what a boring ass schmuck Paul Reiser is. How he's just a corporate drone. Hey, if I gotta feed somebody to a bug.
I worked with a producer video game producer who I think of as the Paul Reiser of. I don't want to work with that guy ever again, but when you mention it, I'm like, oh, damn it, I know that guy. I
have to correct myself. That's the myth, what I was saying about Ridley Scott, but it's actually named by Ron Cobb, the conceptual designer. And he says he would have liked to have used the name Leyland Toyota, but obviously couldn't, so he changed one letter in Leyland and added the Japanese name of his own neighbor. So it's just a myth that it was Ridley Scott's neighbor. Anyway, that's funny.
Well, do they even call, is there dialogue that they call the company by its name? Or
it just shows up
because I can recall in this, it seems like they only call it the company. There's stuff with the logo.
It's the CIA, basically.
There's stuff with the logo, and I want to say maybe it comes up on the screens, perhaps. But yeah, it's not. I also love their kind of Egyptian style wings motif.
Yeah.
Not the one that's like the W, but there's actually like almost a Horus style wings motif that shows up on a lot of stuff. It's so there's just so much depth, and it makes so much sense.
Yes.
It's designed every bit from their patches, and it makes you, when you see all the kind of knockoffs, and it's part of that knockoff stuff is budgetary constraints. You don't get to nobody gets the same budget that this does, and certainly not
because it's not cheap to build all this shit. It's not cheap to create all these rooms and all these chairs and all these walls and all these buttons and all this glop. I mean, this is hard, and the ripoffs show us how hard this is, to do. It's amazing.
There is so much done to make this feel believable that when you see it done right, it resonates, and that's why we still keep coming back to this movie.
Yeah. One plot point that has happened that I don't even remember exactly how it pays off, but when I first watched this, I thought that they had a shuttle-like ship that went down, but in fact, they land aliens. Right, they land the whole damn ship, the whole refinery.
Well, right. Well, no, they keep the refinery stays in orbit.
Oh, the refinery. Okay.
So where do they land? What is the part that they're landing?
It's a tugboat.
Okay. And so is that destroyed? Or how did they get back to their ship then?
They take back off in the tugboat.
So then why can't they use the tugboat instead of the shuttle? Like they were asking, seemed like they only had the shuttle option, and they were saying
the tugboat is everywhere that the quarters, like the refinery part, is attached, because they detach it. That it comes out, it comes out on an arm.
That's right.
And they detach the tug, basically.
Okay.
And then the alien, the reason they only have the shuttle is A, they self-destruct the whole thing.
Yeah.
And B, when they
but
talk
that's later.
about the shuttle,
but I'm talking about before that, when they're talking about escaping, before the Ashes discovered to be an android.
They're pretty sure the alien's not on the shuttle because the shuttle's tiny.
Right.
And that's why.
Well, and also probably the self-destruct item is probably on the tugboat. That now it makes sense. If their ship is also the bomb, then obviously they can't take the bomb. Anyway, okay, so they land that thing on this planet, which is where John Hurt gets a crab on his face, and so then they have to spend time while Harry Dean Stanton and Yaphet Kotto are trying to fix some damage they did when they land.
Yeah, when they land, the climate and the particulates and all of that, they have a whole breach that basically just renders them inoperable until they get it fixed.
Right. And so while those guys are trying to take, it's going to take them anywhere from 12 to 24 hours to fix.
They do a Scotty, except in reverse, because it's real.
Yes.
So they say, because they're not expected to be Scotty, they say 17 hours. And then Parker goes, 25 hours.
I thought that was great.
Which
is so funny.
Again, why this is blue collar, why this works.
Yeah.
I totally believe that.
If you tell somebody 17, they're going to ask you to do it in 12.
Right.
Yes.
So if you tell them it's 25, Dallas and the crew aren't going to know.
Right.
And if you pull it off in 17, you look like a hero.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It also prevents you, and I've had to do this, and I don't like to do it, but you give yourself about a quarter padding, because you don't know what the hell's going to happen. So if you pull it off in 17, you look like a hero, and if you don't, then nobody's going, I thought you told me blah, blah, blah time.
Right.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And that part's brilliant, and it's actually all the time what happens.
Yeah.
And again, I can tell you, because if you say 17, they're going to try to Scotty you into of course. You have 12. No, that's not how that works.
Yep.
You can't magically make time.
Right.
What if you do twice as much work? Okay, sure. I've actually had somebody tell me that. Well, what if you did twice? What if you did two things? Okay, well, yes, it's considering I'm not two people. I'll get right on that. I should have thought of that myself. Why do I do two things? So I love all of their dialogue, just works so well. And anybody who's worked in any kind of engineering, tech, or mechanics work or anything knows exactly why when he says 17, Parker says 25.
All right, we should move along to the chest.
So let's go straight to the chest burster scene, because they spend several days worried. What are they going to do about John Hurt, who has been incapacitated by this weird crab thing that is attached to themselves.
Well, not just that. They're worried. there were. Oh, hey, look, this thing also has acid.
It has absolutely, so they can't cut it off him.
Can't cut it off,
and they can't cut it off him. And right, yeah, go ahead.
So anyway, eventually, all of a sudden, after being out for like what seems to be a couple days, John Hurt's suddenly awake, and the creature is actually, it goes like this: first, the creature's missing, and then John Hurt's awake. The creature dies. The creature had just done whatever it's supposed to do, and now, like a fly or whatever, it has died. And John Hurt's up and around and feeling hungry, and so they're all like, "Fantastic! Let us go back into spin animation, but first to have dinner." And so they or lunch. They go to lunch, and then happens that scene, the one that everybody remembers, And Julia, did you read? Well, Tony and I saw a bunch of sketches from Saturday Night or whatever it was called. There's a Japanese Saturday Night Live Downtown that played with all kinds of alien stuff over and over again. It was like one of their favorite motifs is the chest burst.
One of them he is the little extra jaw comes out and it sticks in the guy's mouth, and then he starts counting his teeth like a dentist. Yeah, Downtown. That's a great.
That little creature is so cute that comes out.
So yeah,
so the way it's done. We won't
describe it set for set, but I mean bit for bit. But I will say, Julie, before you talk about the puppet, I just got to say that when this thing actually happens, a creature bursts from John Hurt's chest, and when that actually happens, the actors had already seen it like not work a couple times, so to some extent they were prepared. But nevertheless, when the effect actually pays off, and it's all a practical effect of this puppet punches through this T-shirt, and blood and awful like bits of cow innards fly around. Veronica Cartwright of Invasion of the Body Snatchers and so much great stuff. Veronica Cartwright is so shocked that she screams, and then she moves backwards and she trips over a prop and she falls down, and then she scrambles to get back up, and it's all real. I mean, that's what's great is they all just look
they were so upset. Yaphet Kotto was so upset by the blood and guts that he apparently went into complete shock and locked himself in a room for hours, not refusing to talk to anybody. No, it's a horrific scene, and even the scenes that didn't work, there are used because they have, when it looks like it's trying to punch through a shirt, that was just a failed one, and so they just used that shot as well. And then, I mean, it's a really amazing effect. And then, the little creature is just so cute. It's so funny. It's like just pops out with its no eyes and its little, crazy teeth, and then it crawls away. And it's just, I don't know. So that was it was very, very cute, despite how disgusting it was.
Although after Spaceballs, it's hard to not replay that part.
Is that the one that does the WB Frog where it dances and stuff?
Oh, baby. Yeah.
All this time I've been wondering what that was.
I mean, that doesn't suck because it's a funny bit, but now when I watch this movie, I unfortunately expect Top Hat and the. So
it skitters away, and so they dump John Hurt into space, and now the movie kicks into gear. The second half of this 2-hour movie, now there's a monster, and the rest of the film is literally try to capture the monster, run from the monster, find the monster, and finally try to get away from the monster.
I think is cool about the way they behave, even though they've just seen this thing literally burst its way out of their friend's chest, is because it starts out being so small, they're still kind of cocky about the way they're looking for it. Like they don't know anything about the life cycle of this animal, so they're not like immediately assuming that within a matter of hours it's going to be, the size of a person.
Right.
And I
7-foot person.
Yeah, I think that's kind of cool, because I think that is, I think that's realistic. We keep going back to like how this movie has like a very, believable feel. Like I think people would go, this thing burst its way out of John Hurt's chest, but it's only the size of a chihuahua, so I can kill that. And
we can just take a net and go stand by a locker we think it's in and figure on grabbing it when it jumps out. I mean, that's which is kind of hilarious. But and
all of their plan. I kept saying, I don't think they've thought this plan through. And Jason kept going, I don't think they had a plan at all. I don't think this is a plan at
not
all.
quite a plan. None of their plans are quite planned. I mean, one of them is
it's I think a lot about like if you come across like a cockroach, right?
Yeah.
Like you're always kind of cocky when you're approaching a roach because you don't expect like you step on a roach a couple of times, it's still alive, it's still like trying to flip its way back over. You never assume that people always like forget how tough cockroaches are. Like that's how these people are.
Also, we had a really bad roach problem when I lived in Savannah, and those roaches are these tree roaches who come in and they would eat through your plastic bags of bread. Like they would eat through the plastic and eat your bread. So to keep all the bread, but their instinct is to fly at your face. So the first time you're like spraying a roach and that bastard flies at your face, like specifically, that is not a fun time, by the way. And so
you're like, I forgot that you could fly. Yes, exactly.
And that's what they do. They also super like you have to spray for like half a minute if you want to kill one with spray. So you learn to try to stomp on them instead if you can, if you're, don't want roaches everywhere. But
those things are going to outlive us all.
With this, I think nobody on the crew, that's what is the magic of this. We get the impression later on that Ash kind of knows what might happen.
Yeah.
But he's not sure. Like he's still fact finding. But there's no way for them to think that this tiny creature is going to be a 7-foot creature within the space of 24 hours or less.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Like no one would put that together. That doesn't even happen.
There's an error here that maybe is fixed by missing footage. Who knows? But after the creature, first person to die is Harry Dean Stanton, and he dies by himself. And then afterwards, Parker and Lambert go back to Dallas and go, this thing's really big.
I love the set that he is killed in. By the way, with like all the water dripping down and everything.
It's like a hangar.
It's really interesting, but I had a hard time believing that there would be such a thing. But I mean, it looks cool.
Well, also, Rain was asking the same thing. Like, it's like, why is there water everywhere? Why is this? That's a part of the ship that nobody has to go in, so it doesn't matter as much. Also, remember that the ship's been damaged when they hit the planet. So the atmosphere, especially in a place that could be close to damage, isn't necessarily the same atmosphere as you would have had before that happened. I mean, mainly it's just because it looks cool and gives it an atmosphere, right? Like, never underestimate the power of, like, wouldn't this be neat if...
Yeah, it's the rule of cool.
Right? And it's got chains everywhere, and the chains are meant to haul the engine pieces. There's these huge engine pieces in there and like some shuttle kind of stuff, but in general it's because it looks cool and sounds cool to have chains everywhere and have water. But the practical side of that is you have deep within the bowels of the ship that almost nobody else is going to go, so it doesn't matter if it's raining quote unquote there because of atmosphere differential. And then it's also at some point been damaged or breached in a way that also makes sense. So either way, it looks and sounds awesome.
Like, very quick cuts. So it's difficult for me to see in the theatrical version exactly what's happening. You get the idea that Harry Dean Stanton's head is being punched by the internal jaw of the alien. And this is like the first time you see it.
Yeah, think about, like, we are so used to this alien design by now.
Yeah.
Like, imagine, if you can, going back to that, like the very first time, which is kind of hard to do, even like not being so familiar with that. Like,
but thank you for asking this. This is I like this. I like this thought exercise.
It's such a freaky design.
Yeah,
like it's like you think of this animal as being kind of insectoid, but there's like a bunch of things about it that don't make any sense, and like that sort of secondary mouth and its tongue, like there's it's just enough off-putting because it doesn't seem like something that would occur in nature.
Except some eels have that, we've discovered. Like, that's Giger's whole thing is this biomechanical stuff, and most of it is vaginas and penises because That's what he does.
He loves
So
the
then you look at
alienness
the head
of
of the alien. It's
Yeah.
super duper phallic, right? And then you look at the sides of the ship that they board. All the entrances are, vaginas.
Yeah.
But hey, they snuck it into like nobody was picking up unless you looked at one of his art books and went, oh, I got you.
There's this
enough
weird
to get an
mixture
R-rated
of
movie.
rot and orifices and sleekness and disease and phallic symbols and intrusion. There's just a great deal of disturbance just all wrapped up in Giger's art, which just gets transported completely into the designs of this movie. It's amazing. And you're right about like all those hallways they go through in the ship, which appear to all be like they're all kind of weirdly organic with difficult geometry to describe.
Hands off to the people who made all of that. That was all practical stuff.
Holy mackerel! Yeah,
it's remarkable. The practical effects, the whole thing are remarkable. I love the cat. Jones the cat.
Oh,
I was reading that the way they got the cat to hiss at the alien is by having a German Shepherd behind like a screen and then slowly removing the screen so that suddenly the cat's like, holy shit, there's a German Shepherd there.
Poor cat. I always wonder because being a cat person, I'm like, oh, poor Jones. I'm like, hey, don't throw Jones around or go back and get Jones, like the Jonesy the whole time.
Literally save the cat.
Yeah. It's remarkable. Oh man, and when I was a kid too, even though I hadn't seen the movie, I so wanted the really big action figure they made. That thing amazing.
Yes,
glow in the dark bits. And it was, since you don't see the alien very much in this, and I think that's to its favor, the fact that there was an action figure that you could get where you could go, wow, look at what that thing actually looked like was also really cool. It was kind of expensive, and then I don't think they made a lot of them because they came pretty rare, or they get broken a lot.
I know exactly the one you're thinking about, and he's quite tall, right? And
it
was so the guy who plays him is 7'1", so
right. He's like Mr. Holm from Star Trek. Yeah. I should mention this thing about Brett's death, Dean Stanton's death. It's in the theatrical version. It's super quick. You do get the impression that his head's getting punched by this extending internal jaw thing, the second mouth that the alien has. There's an uncut version that I think is even longer than whatever's in the director's cut that takes forever. The alien's reaching out, there's screaming, there's the whole weird, I'm going to rape you with my weird bony tail thing that later gets reused in the theatrical version for Lambert's death. And it's super long. And I just find it fascinating, all these choices that Ridley Scott makes and then cuts, considering this is the guy who made Blade Runner, right? Who famously, I think he's made like 7 versions of Blade Runner. And that might not be the right number. It might be more like 10. But, he just constantly is cutting and recutting and going, is it better like this? Is it better like this? Do we have just a cutaway? Do we have Dean Stanton hanging on chains? I don't know. So you guys will have to tell me, by the way, I just mentioned the weird tail between Harry Dean Stanton's legs, like the thing's going to punch up through his body, through the anus, I guess. That later gets reused for Veronica Cartwright's death. How does this play in the director's cut?
In the director's cut, it's still it's not like it is later.
Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting. So, we should probably skim over like all the details of each of the individuals' deaths. When you come away from it, what you're left with is another thing that becomes part of our cultural conversation, which is how best to describe it? The radar conversation. Like Dallas is hunting for the alien, and his comrades are going, "Oh, it's coming towards you, or it's near you, or whatever. Get away from there." That stuff, I don't think I remember seeing it before here, but I've seen it 1,000 times after. And it's it's good. It's good every time. It's a good gimmick where people are yelling at how close you are, but you don't see the thing coming. Is that something that like when you guys think of stuff that you're seeing in this middle section of being chased by the monster, what else do you think just became a part of like cliche, good or bad, after this?
Well, all the sliminess, everything's slimy.
Yeah.
Everything.
I
dripping.
mean, if I think of Julia's right, like I think of the 80s were definitely a decade of slime. And this
in many ways,
this
more ways than one.
yeah, but I think this movie might have had a big part in spawning the use of excessive goo in 80s genre films.
Mm-hmm.
Did anybody see that one? Because we're going to watch an Alien ripoff and we haven't decided what to do. I think it probably won't be. What's the one where you have the one with Aaron Moran where it was a Roger Corman picture, a Roger Corman Alien ripoff, and you have at one point this like full on assault by an alien. It was called Planet
Forbidden World.
Forbidden
something?
World. Yes, I always confuse it with Forbidden Planet. But yeah, easily one of the most famous ripoffs. But I'm not sure if that's the one that we want to do because it just feels a little too grotesque and exploitative. I don't know. So anyway,
I have another random bit for you. Harrison Ford was offered the role of Dallas, but he turned it down. So that'd be another.
Well, I mean, he dies like.
I think he would have been good in that.
Imagining Meryl Streep and Harrison Ford in this film instead of
to clarify my earlier point about Meryl Streep is I think she would have been in a lot more action type roles if she had been Ripley.
That's
like Sigourney Weaver really was our first. Well, she is the final girl of this movie. She is also like much more assertive and much more of an action hero than say like Jamie Lee Curtis is in Halloween. And because of this, like I kind of think of Sigourney Weaver as an action hero. And that's not necessarily something that I think of Meryl Streep being. Yeah. Not that I don't think that she couldn't do that because she's Meryl Streep and she can do anything. But like I'm having a harder time envisioning that career trajectory for her.
Yeah, no, understood. I mean, she's made all kinds of interesting choices, but when I think about Streep and Harrison Ford here, I just don't know. I think he was right to turn it down. I don't think Han Solo belongs in this movie, and I don't think that Harrison Ford belongs in a movie where he dies like 40 minutes before the end of the film.
I actually think Harrison Ford would have been fine in this, except for what you just, as an actor. But as you just saying, I do think it would have been distracting, because this was before Indiana Jones or Blade Runner, so I think all you would have been able to think about is Han Solo.
Yeah. I mean, but to be honest, anything can work. I mean, you never know. It's literally impossible to say. But okay. So the other death that I think is fascinating is Dallas, who bravely goes out looking for it because he still thinks that he can toast it with these over-the-shoulder flamethrowers that they have, and it sneaks up on him. Using that, the whole scene.
Again, terrible plan.
Right. Well, the funny thing is, the plan works, except for that he doesn't do anything.
He doesn't do it. Exactly.
I'm going to find it in the air vent, and I'm
and then I will kill it. And he forgot the "I will kill it" part when it came.
Right. I guess because he's so shocked by what it looks like.
Yeah, I mean, again, nobody thought that the size it would be what it is.
That must be it.
No,
even though Yaphet Kotto, they shouldn't though, by the way, because Yaphet Kotto goes, it was big, it was so big, but he didn't see it. That's the crazy thing.
No, but he can tell from the.
No, he did, but he did. He was there. He just got away.
When he walks in and
he walks in on it and he says, "Hey, he got away." Basically.
Oh, okay. All right. Okay, I can dig it. All right. Well, anyway, we finally get a good look at its face for the first time when it sneaks up on Dallas. And it is shocking also with the lack of eyes. Something really scary about a big toothy thing with no eyes. And its arms are extended. It's a good gag. It's honestly,
because of the way it designed, it does periodically actually blend in with the ship extremely well. So when it does pop out, it's legitimately jarring.
Yes. That's just amazing. So okay. Eventually, everybody has died. The Lambert's is disturbing. We hear Lambert die. This is Veronica Cartwright. We hear her die on the radio. Really much more than
I was irritated by her situation, and it was interesting because we were talking before the call about the fight or flight or freeze or fornicate, as they say politely in the article I was reading. But anyway, the reactions that people have to fear and stress. And she clearly has the freeze response, because she could have run while he was killing Yaphet Kotto, but instead she stands there horrified, screaming, which again, like Tony was saying, you never know how you're gonna react.
Absolutely.
But, I just thought, I was so irritated by that. I was like, come on, run. What are you doing?
And they never actually shot a real death for her. They just ran out of
No.
time, and so they built it. The editors basically built a death for her by reusing parts of unused footage from Harry Dean Stanton's death,
Right.
and then having her loop in dialogue where they hear her dying, and you don't even notice that you never saw her.
No, it's done well.
And then so what we're left with is, oh well, you know what? We didn't even. I apologize, but we didn't talk about about Ash. Jeez, the producers were annoyed because they thought this is an unnecessary subplot. But it actually is super duper important. Tony, do you want to explain what goes down with Ash?
Well, Ripley obviously thinks something's weird is going on.
Yeah,
and then as she's talking, Ash shows up to basically silence her.
Yeah.
Throws her around. He's now we're like, wow, why does he have superhuman strength? Ends up the corporation the whole time they just sent these people were pretty much fodder. If they came back, cool, we've got the ore. But they know enough to know that this thing might be weaponable. So there's a whole lot of stuff that we have to make up until we get to sequels that we have to make up in our minds, because
interesting.
We go, wait, the corporation knew? They sent an android, and an android that's good enough. They find out, well, Parker goes, he's a robot once he kills him. So they don't, these Ash, whatever he is, this Ash android, is new enough that he's and good enough that he's fooled them all.
Mm-hmm.
Even better is, throughout the time he's drinking this milk stuff. It could be milk, but it's also his blood is this milky liquid,
which I love.
Yeah,
it's so gross.
Why is that? It's like, well, if you have an android, he doesn't have to have blood, and I don't know what would have happened if he had been cut, which is why he's a science officer. Maybe he would encounter a scalpel, but counting on the fact that's not going to happen, right? He's safe enough, and and
the character that he's decided on, when you consider everything that he does as a choice to pass as a human, the character he's decided on is somebody who never exerts himself in any way. That he will never get in front of something that is dangerous or something like that. So he's minimizing his likelihood of bleeding. But
so he's Ripley's saved, and they smash Ash, and he fills them in like, you guys are all, because what she discovers, she overrides the command and discovers that the real programming Mother's known all along, that all of the humans were expendable, which is also why you send an android, because even if he had to stay awake, it's not going to matter, because he's not really going to need oxygen, and he could stay up and pilot the ship. He could do whatever he needs to do, even if everybody else is dead. So there's kind of a twofold thing, but the company was more than willing to just kill everybody because they thought that they could make a lot of money weaponizing this creature that they hadn't even necessarily seen.
We should analyze whether that is a plan.
These are, we things happen in the sequels, but as far as we can tell, they don't know exactly. Or Ash is an even better actor than we know, and he's seen parts of them, but he's still studying, so I think that he really didn't know exactly. Like, he had some ideas about what this thing was. And they hook him back up again. It's cool to see an engineer who can just hook an android back up, even though they don't.
That's pretty great.
They hook his head back up, and he's like, hey, sorry, and he's still a smirky jackass.
Yes.
I'm so sorry. For you.
You have my
sympathies.
Yeah.
It's Ian Holm, by the way. It's Bilbo Baggins from the Lord of the Rings movies.
Bilbo Baggins got dark in his old age. I love his also the line of I admire its purity. I just I know he's a robot, but he plays sociopath so well.
That's right.
If I know he's snarky right down to the end when he's just ahead.
It's a great effect, by the way. It looks good. You know, it
He's
looks pretty
probably
good.
thinking that they're still going to rebuild him whenever
Yeah.
he's thinking like they're going to salvage the ship and rebuild him at some point, like, 'cause, you know, that he is a machine. So that's probably why he's got so much attitude.
Yeah, that is if, I mean, I really don't understand these androids completely, so I don't know if he actually has too much of a sense of self-preservation. I don't know. I really don't know what it is that he wants out of life, or whether
Seems
he
like
expects
Bishop in the second film does have a sense of self-preservation.
Bishop in the second film is an almost angelic character, you know, and that's
Well,
a
I
spoiler, by the way, for the second film, and I'm sorry if you.
I mean, the main thing that he's
Jason,
not
if they haven't
actually-
seen Aliens and they're listening to this podcast,
right, then I've already
sorry.
also ruined Paul Reiser for you. So
Yeah,
Right.
I'm sorry.
although I think, you know, Ash's first, I think he still does have this self, like he didn't anticipate getting smacked with the fire extinguisher or butane canister. I can't remember which one it is. You know,
yeah,
because he's preserving both the company's interest and himself.
yeah,
If he kills Ripley, no one will know he's an android, right?
yeah. No,
So-
that's true.
That's that his just the way he has self-preservation, the way he goes about it is, you know, a ruthless corporate, I've been programmed to do this, to take care of this way. Although he's really ruthless, like killing somebody by choking them with a magazine
That's pretty
is
wild.
not, he didn't just try to snap her neck. Like, this is a vindictive asshole.
Yeah.
Like, whoever programmed this, and we know more about that later, but at the time, you know, again, I'm going to take this as we don't know anything else past this, right? In the context of this film, whoever programmed that personality was a sadist. Because
yeah,
like that's a violent, horrible death.
He's very
and he throws
creative
her all
in a
around.
bad
Like,
way.
it's not, he doesn't just come at her and, like, the alien is actually more to the point and
Right.
less ruthless in its instantaneous kill or semi-instantaneous kill, right?
Yeah.
Ash is just vindictive and horrible.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. And the way that they have programmed, you know, this is all very weird, but yes, they've given him a personality that is either they've done it on purpose, or as Bishop says in the second one, there's something wrong with these androids. I mean, their creativity is out of whack. There's something about their brains that causes them to misbehave and
Well, again,
giggle and do
this
weird
is
shit.
why,
you know?
whoever programmed them, if they can learn this way,
Yeah.
this is what we talked about last time, where,
Yeah.
okay, we built this way. Well, they should never do that. Like, that's not how we programmed it. Well, guess what? If it can learn,
Yeah,
you know, something else I forgot to mention last time was they had these AIs that were talking to each other. It was like a couple years ago. I can't remember how long it was, but basically there was a language computer.
Yep.
And these two language computers developed an intermediary language that was not human accessible.
oh,
And they were so kind of freaked out, like, we don't know what these computers are saying or doing, that they
right.
that they shut them down. Now, I am guessing that shutting them down meant move them to a secure government facility, because that's probably what happened. But you know, that's how, you know, you get an Ash because you go, well, let's put in this personality, and then it starts to develop that, and then, oh, look, now it's a one who will throw somebody around and choke them with a magazine.
Yeah.
What a weird way to kill somebody, by the way.
Oh, exactly. No, it's a completely bonkers like idea for him to have. You know, he doesn't just grab her throat and strangle her. He's going to suffocate her by forcing a magazine down her throat. I mean, that is a weird thing for him to suddenly decide to do.
I mean, you take into the fact that it's also becomes kind of sexually charged when you take into the account that it's probably a porn magazine.
Yeah, no, there's definitely there's a sexual element to it. Also, I love how Yaphet Kotto comes up to try to, like, because they intercept him. And so he just, you know, he clutches, basically Ian Holm takes his other hand and starts trying to basically reach through Yaphet Kotto's ribcage to grab his heart. And the only way that they avoid that is luckily there's yet another person. There's Veronica Cartwright. And then eventually Yaphet Kotto whacks him in the head with a canister. Knocks his head off, which is so silly that it's wonderful. Anyway, yes.
And again, the practical effects are just brilliant on the.
No, it looks beautiful. looks beautiful, like all the way through. I'm just so happy the whole time. If they had done this in 1997 and had replaced all of this with CGI, I don't think I would be nearly as happy.
It wouldn't be. Yeah, that's the thing. Sometimes these films, I'm going to include the early CG films as well, like Matrix or Jurassic Park. You just can't. Nothing gets better with better CGI. It just doesn't get better than that. They did as perfect a job as was going to be done, and just leave it be. I think it's the same here.
Yeah. So I know that we're running super long. We did go through the deaths, and so you're left with Sigourney Weaver, who has to sort of run a kind of gauntlet to try to escape. She's decided she's going to make it on her own on the shuttle, but first she's going to set the ship. She's got right. She's got to set the ship to explode, but then when she realizes that she wants to get the cat, she tries to turn off the self-destruct.
No, that's not it, though.
Okay, explain to me what goes down. Why does she try to turn it off?
She was out and about trying to set up the auto-destruct, and then when she gets back to the shuttle, the alien is blocking her entrance to the shuttle.
Blocking her way,
so
that's right.
Like, well, now I can't get to the shuttle, and right. I'd rather not die by self-destruct at the moment, although I think that possibly a lot of characters would have gone ahead and been like, oh, well, I guess we're all dying here. But so she's going to go stop the self-destruct, I guess, so she can buy time. And then she can't do that because Mother's a bitch. And so she gets back and said, thankfully, the alien is no longer blocking her way. And she gets on the shuttle. And presumably, the shuttle is small enough that you can see if an alien is in it. Right. It shouldn't be able to hide. And in fact, they built that shuttle set around the actor and the costumes so that he could hide. It was really interesting. But yeah, so she blows up the ship. She barely makes it out with the shuttle. And then all is well, and she puts the cat into the the freezing chamber or whatever, and starts to take her clothes off and all that. And then the fucking alien pops out of the console. So this is the scene that really annoys me, because she's in the tiny underwear that doesn't fit her, and then she gets the clever idea to sneak into the spacesuit so she can freeze the alien. But there's like gratuitous crotch shot for no reason. I'm just like, why do you have to ruin this?
Yeah, there's some male gazy action to that, which is okay, it makes sense. Like, everybody's in their underwear when we first see them in the capsule.
Yeah, but her underwear is not realistic underwear.
No. The way it's shot here is definitely, especially watching. When being a younger teen was like cool, but being an adult, and I don't know, who am I to judge? But when you watch it now, you're like, yeah, that doesn't.
It does feel gratuitous, especially because this is her at her strongest,
right?
And
the most badass thing that she does in the entire movie, because she's so still, the way she like puts on the like spacesuit and everything, and why they didn't put her in maybe a little bit more practical of an outfit is a bit beyond me.
Yeah. I don't know.
Also, before that though, let's go back. You were asking about the director's cut. So in the novelization, and then also in the director's cut that we see, so all of this is a surprise in Aliens when you see this behavior. Mm-hmm. But if you look at how it plays out here, she's down in the guts of the ship, and she sees all of this stuff that looks like it's made like the spaceship they were at, down on the planet.
Yeah.
And Dallas is cocooned up. Mm-hmm. Brett is there, and everybody's kind of cocooned up in this stuff, and Dallas says, kill me. Well, now we don't know why until we see more of that in Aliens. And we don't know exactly if that was the same thing here, exactly what's going on. But we know that something's really bad has happened, and for some reason, they're being preserved by the creature, even though we thought they were dead.
Yeah. So, and that gets cut because
because it doesn't help. It's easy to excise that scene because the hive idea, all of that stuff happens, in a later movie. You don't need that is an extra subplot that you don't really need. It makes it interesting it makes it more interesting now. And it's a really fantastic piece of work too when you see it. That set and the way it's got all this organic stuff that this alien is somehow spackled together is really, really cool. By the way, something that's interesting about rewatching this and talking about the video game and in Alien Isolation, one of the things that makes it brutal as well is you can hide in the lockers, kind of like she does with the spacesuit. But eventually the alien knows to start looking in the lockers because it learns, and then you can hold your breath and back into the locker, but eventually it starts to know that trick too. So it's just mean. Like, and it makes sense because that's kind of how the alien, like, how's the alien know to get into the shuttle?
Yeah.
Well, because it learns. It's smart. It's like this perfect organism.
Yeah, it sees that she was headed that way, and so it goes that way.
And
it hides. So it's like, it doesn't just go, oh, that's where she's going to go so I can get her. It goes, oh, no, I need to hide so I can save myself because she's obviously about to blow up that ship.
Yeah.
So it's
like, when she blows out the airlock and sends the alien out into space, essentially, this is to me like the best example as to how tough this creature is.
Yeah.
Because it's completely fine in the vacuum of space. In fact, it starts to climb on the outside of the spaceship and starts to try and climb up into one of the rockets on the back of this spaceship. And it doesn't finally die until she turns it on to like burn it out. And that's crazy.
Yeah. Well, it doesn't have, its blood doesn't boil. It's whatever that compound is that it can.
Yeah.
They remark on, hey, it can change itself or adapt. And the way it can adapt is, that's scary as hell because it starts to crawl up.
Yeah.
Damn, like, what can you?
Yeah, finally it just tumbles into space. Presumably just fine, really. It'll wind up somewhere.
Well, I mean, once it gets charred up, I think
I'm not sure. It appears to be still in one piece, and it goes tumbling away. And
it hits somebody's other space windshield, like some other way a buzzard would hit your windshield.
Yes.
What was that, man?
What was that? Eventually, it'll land somewhere that if it doesn't burn up on re-entry, it'll just start running around wherever it's going. This thing is tough to kill. Yes. And in fact, I don't remember like where. Well, you know what? We'll talk about aliens when we get to aliens.
It would eventually starve to death, even if it somehow managed to survive being blasted by.
Unless it could go into suspended animation,
right? Exactly. Hibernation of some kind.
It could just freeze like the people.
I would assume, this is just me speculating based on how quickly it grows. I would presume that it would have to eat a lot.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't.
That's just
me
speculating on the way other big animals that grow fast operate, but I doubt at this point in the game they really thought that much I think they did think a bit about the biology of this animal because like they're with like the face hugger and like the life, they definitely thought a lot about like the life cycle, but it really wasn't until Aliens that I think that they started to get more into, okay, how does this thing actually exist as an animal that is out in nature. But I guess I should save that for next week.
Yeah, absolutely. And we'll get to think of them a lot more and I say them because it is aliens in that one. Boy, it'll be fun to discuss that coming out. Yeah.
Also, how great is it that we don't really see the full alien until it's blown out of the airlock?
That's true.
Like,
it's a really good point.
Not until then that we even get like, oh, it's really that size, and look at all the way it's shaped and all of that. And we only get to see that for just a tiny bit. And I think that's also part of, because I struggle with this a lot lately as well, because many times people want to show like, hey, we spent all this time creating this cool creature. We want to show it a lot, or let's show how cool we can animate it or whatever. And while I don't think that every creature needs to be hidden in the way that this one is, because that, eventually kind of becomes its own trope or a way to hide. Some people think it's also like, well, if I hide it too much, it's going to be cheap. But that happened all the time. That's really effective. I think you need to make those choices. But the fact they could afford everything they could afford and still chose to make it hidden so often, so that that we don't know its full extent as well is a really great choice. And really done really fantastically. Which I guess part of the reason why it's so the second movie is such, in a way, the antithesis of this.
That's right.
Because they're willing to just show tons of them and
many different choices. And all skillful, by the way. I'm not knocking it.
Oh,
the second one's extraordinarily skillful and so different in so many ways. It's amazing.
I not a knock against this movie, but, and again, we'll get more into this next week. Full disclosure, I do like Aliens more than this one.
I feel like Drew, I feel like they are so different from one another. You almost can't. To me, it's like the difference between the Kane Mutiny and the Thing. I mean, they're just different.
Well, it's not that different.
Maybe not that, but that's very different.
I understand when people tell me they prefer this one, and because to me they're both very good movies, so it's like, and they're both iconic, but I don't know, again, this is one
thing's for sure, this is a way slower movie. I mean, no doubt about it. I
mean, that's the beauty though, right? If I want to watch a sci-fi horror movie, that atmospheric horror movie, if I want my sci-fi fix of The Haunting, I watch this. If I want to see a big budget action movie full of creatures that are scary as hell, I'll watch Aliens.
Isn't that interesting?
I think you get there. I think you get a different fix from each of those.
But I do think
that's what different directors bring. And
to Jason's comment, I do think that they complement each other well, and I can very seldomly think of a sequel that expands upon the mythology of an original movie as well as Aliens does, especially considering the fact that it's a different screenwriter and director.
No, I'm with you, and I think that it's interesting too because Aliens builds off of it in such a fantastic way that you hadn't expected, and even to the point where they're again building off of stuff that's in the director's cut. So most people hadn't seen the director's cut. They know what happened if they read the novel again, but to take those elements and make those the parts of the main part of your movie is interesting. However, I will say that Aliens is the one. If they'd never made Aliens, it would still be a great movie and people would reference it all the time.
Yeah,
I think Aliens is what really got people because it was such a phenomenon of that time period. That's why we have so many of the Dark Horse comics, so many action figures. Well, what if a chest burster did this? And you had gorilla aliens and all this stuff. Like it tweaked people's imaginations in a way that was the right place, the right time. And that's what set the tone for the franchise that it became.
As sequels often do. And let's hold that there because I guarantee you we're going to touch on all of this. So when Ripley finally kicks the alien out of the airlock and burns it up in the engine to send it flying off into space, dead or alive, what will become of that alien? Who knows? Kane's son, we can call it if we need to give it a name. She goes into spin animation with the kitty cat and heads towards Earth, and that's the end. I mean, I am trying to imagine in 1979 seeing this just amazing film. I mean, The Shining doesn't exist when this came out. This is one of the scariest movies ever. And I remember being in gym in school in 1979, and this kid said that he saw Alien. I said, "What it's like?" And he goes, "You will pee your pants. It is so scary." I remember him saying that, and it is. It's damn scary. I know that for the second week in a row, we've talked about a movie to death to the point where there's very little to actually add in our closing thoughts, but we may as well. So Tony, Julia, Drew, and then we'll go into endorsements. Tony, knowing we'll pick it up next week with Aliens, what are your final thoughts?
This film, like I said, I mean, we've talked about it to death, but also there's so much that's been said and written about it. I hope that we lended something extra to the discourse.
Yeah.
But regardless, a masterclass in building tension. It basically colored how sci-fi looks. If you're not going to do a clean aesthetic a la Star Trek, or the slightly Western, there's a Western grunginess to Star Wars. The third choice is this. And I would say, it's been you'd be hard pressed to say that we haven't chosen one of those three since they came out, right? So around 78, 79, this is what sci-fi is mostly. And not to say that there aren't visionary conceptual artists and people out there doing new and cool looking stuff, but what this changed and put forward in our pop culture, way we saw sci-fi and gritty sci-fi, this changed everything in a lot of ways. There's a lot leading up to it. Again, like I said, it's also good to watch this. Go watch Dark Star as well if you haven't seen it, which is grand. Totally different, different vibe and everything, but well worth checking out. It's a great movie. But there's just so much here. There's the reason we're still talking about it is because, again, this is in '79 and it still resonates. It still looks great. It still feels real. Even more so than even more big budget films that have come out recently. And that's some lightning in a bottle right there.
Yeah, well said. Yeah. Julia, final thoughts.
I don't really have anything to add. It's just a really visually stunning movie, very creative. Again, I'm just always blown away by the innovative, the ability people have to come up with these innovative ways to create effects that are just, you're just like, how did they do that? And you find out and it's like, wow, how did somebody come up with that? And the sounds too are really, really crazy and cool. But I think it's just a very iconic, memorable film, and I'm looking forward to talking about the next one, which I have seen the second one, so it'll be fun to talk about.
It'll be fun to see it from scratch, though. Because I haven't seen it in a super long time. I also want some bubblegum cards of the second one because I used to have some bubblegum cards of
Oh yeah, I had those too.
Bishop and everybody, and man, those were great. Drew, what are your final thoughts?
I mean, this is a classic. I just kind of like the fact that we just did RoboCop. This is another movie that if it's not part of your vocabulary as a genre fan, then you definitely need to see it because of how much stuff it influenced, if nothing else. But even taking that aside, it's just a really engrossing, terrifying, but entertaining movie at the same time. And, I don't think there are too many movies that can be as scary as this movie is, and at the same time be as entertaining as this movie is. So I think that's an interesting cross section right there. So it's just if you're interested in seeing how a horror film can be constructed like that, this is a good movie to watch just to take notes. Like, I have only run across like a few people in my time who haven't seen it, but if you're somehow listening to this podcast and you have not, for the love of God, find a way to see Alien as soon as possible, because it is a very rightfully important film.
And if you if you're on Dish, I know, and so probably most of the cable companies you can rent it on video on demand. But if you have HBO Max, which a number of people do now, they have both the theatrical or the director's cut, so you can choose. And I have really no advice on which one is more fun. I mean, I really none. Do you guys have a preference? Like, if somebody were to walk in and raise their hand and go, actually, I have never seen Alien, should I watch the theatrical or the director's cut? I mean,
personally, and also, I'm going to add to thoughts, like the crew, the cast and crew of this, like everybody's just firing on all cylinders. Like the cast is amazing. Everybody just does such an excellent job. But I personally, when I go back, especially if I'm going to watch something historical, I prefer to watch the theatrical cut first and get that context of what everybody saw at the time.
Yeah.
And then give it a little bit and then watch the director's cut. That's how I prefer. And again, like I said before, I saw quote unquote the director's cut first of this because I'm pretty sure I read the novel first, just because that's how circumstances went at the time.
Yeah, absolutely.
But that's how I prefer. I think it's cool to see the director's cut, if it's available. But the way my film brain works, I kind of like to see what people saw first and really get a sense of that kind of feeling if I haven't seen the movie.
Yeah.
And then give it a little bit of time and then watch the director's cut. Although sometimes
I agree with that.
If you have the time, you might watch both back to back because you're just like, holy crap, I need to see what's extra.
Yeah. It's rare that it completely changes the feel of the film, but that has happened. I mean, there are a few films where the so-called director's cut, genuinely changes maybe a major thesis of the film.
One of my favorite movies, and it's harder for it to be a favorite for a lot of reasons now, although I still like it, is Payback with Mel Gibson.
Right.
Because of how the circumstances of that movie, and the director was forced off the film.
Yeah.
When they said, hey, come back, do a director's cut, finish it out. From the color grading to the cut, to the edit, to even characters that were put into the theatrical one. They're really different films. Although that one's a really interesting one because you can see what two different visions and editors can do with basically the same footage, or all of the footage that was actually shot.
Yes.
They are different enough movies that it's a fantastic view into editor as storyteller.
Yes.
And directors working with editors as storytellers. I know this is getting far from Aliens, but as we mentioned,
it's an excellent question.
I actually really like that movie. Something about that I write to the theatrical cut a lot. Like I'll have it in the background. I'm not sure why it's that movie in particular, but that's just the way my brain works. It's kind of when I saw the film and I was unemployed and all this other stuff. But that one, it's really like, if you can, I really say like watch it. The theatrical cut's kind of harder to find. It's on DVD. I don't think they ever made a Blu-ray of the theatrical cut.
Interesting.
But Payback is an interesting one to watch and see what two visions of a very similar movie can do. And that's fascinating. But in general, you're correct that like most of the time it's like, oh, that's a cool bit, or oh man, that sometimes it will solidify something where like, oh well, that didn't make sense without that. I'm not sure why they cut that. There's a couple good scenes in Shaolin Soccer that really tie together and are really great scenes. If you've never seen the director's cut of Shaolin Soccer, those bits are really, I think, add to it and make it a better movie.
I was just thinking about the fact that one thing that changes in Payback is color timing, and that's also true of the 1979 Dracula, where if you get the Shot Factory Blu-ray, it has both versions. So the original one had all these like vivid reds and yellows to give it that, I don't know, for want of a better term, this Hammer film kind of look. It just lots of bright colors and a lot of black and white, and red and yellow all over the place. And the later version that director Badham approved is all tinged blue, which looks much more like a modern film, but I vastly preferred the more colorful earlier version, and the Blu-ray gives you the choice. You can literally watch, and it's the same movie. It's not differently cut. There's no different scenes. It's just color timed differently. Isn't that wild? I just thought that was just super wild.
That's fascinating. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Did we get everybody's final thoughts? Yeah, that was mine, and I didn't do one. I just talked about director's cuts. So, okay, let's get our endorsements. Whatever you've been watching or listening to and want to recommend to the planet who is listening, we can only hope. So, Tony, do you have any endorsements for this week?
Well, I'm kind of sad. One, like I mentioned before, Jodorowsky's Dune is worth seeing because it's kind of the prequel to. It's the prequel to the making of this movie. It's the making of the making of. That's in amazing. A way. If everybody's to be believed, you can really see. And it's also, to me, I've met some people who had some valid problems with it post that, and I get it. But to me, there's a lot of uplifting stuff.
There are people throwing shade at a French documentary about the making.
Well, it's more about the man himself. And there's interesting stuff. There's problematic stuff. I get it in retrospect. But at the time when I watched it, and I have it on DVD, and I have rewatched a couple times. It was very uplifting in the way that getting this team together and making this thing, even though that didn't get completed, I found to be like, wow, I just want to go create stuff. I've also been watching a bunch of Universal stuff, which I can talk about at some other point. And everybody's saying it's really good, and I haven't seen it. So I'm gonna sight unseen, because I've met some of the people who were involved. Psycho Gorman. I want to see that because it sounds like what I dig on. So it just came out on VOD, and I've heard enough. You did an interview, right? I noticed.
Yes, I did. Yeah.
So have you seen the film?
No, I have not yet had a chance to see the movie.
I really need to check it out because it sounds like a lot of stuff I dig. And I really like The Void. So there's a lot of people involved in it and a lot of people I trust have said it's really cool. So that is sight unseen, but I'm looking forward. I think I'm going to try to check that out this week as soon as possible.
Yeah, it looks super cool. I got the chance to talk to Stephen Kostansky, who's the director of Psycho Gorman. He was a really interesting guy. And one of the things he said that one of the reasons he wanted to call it Psycho Gorman was because it really made him laugh to think of movie executives sitting around a boardroom table having to say Psycho Gorman multiple times.
Sounds about right. And knowing the people involved, that sounds amazing, and that's part of why I like it. It sounds like, again, who knows what I'll come about. I feel pretty good about it, but it's like when I watched Turbo Kid. I want like that kind of over the top violence.
The kids. The deal is the kids managed to get lucky and find the ability to control this alien from another universe, who is then like a demon in there. Just right. They're controlling him, and it's funny. So that's really neat. Julia, do you have anything to endorse for us?
First of all, apologies for making noise over Tony. Sorry. Apologies for making noise over Tony. I slammed a door and set the alarm off. So,
wow, we didn't even hear it.
I didn't hear it, so you're good.
Good. All right, great. Anyway, I last week was not prepared to endorse WandaVision, but this week I am, because I felt like the first episode was a little slow. Second episode was cool. Third episode is awesome. I'm really getting into it now. So I think it's a really creative, interesting show that is sort of a, fantasy journey through the decades of television. And now they've gotten to the point where it's starting to break, the fantasy is starting to break apart and reality is seeping in, but we still don't know what the reality is. So it's a really neat concept. I'm really enjoying it now. So if you do start to watch it and the first episode doesn't do it for you, wait it out and you'll enjoy it by the second and third.
Wonderful. Drew, what about you? What do you have for us?
Well, I binge watched the entire second season of Jurassic World Camp Cretaceous on Netflix on Friday. As anybody who listens to the podcast avidly will recall, I did endorse the first season last summer. I think it's a great expansion of the Jurassic Park franchise. It's the animation, particularly on the dinosaurs, and oddly the water looks really good. Anytime they show water on this, it looks like real water, which is a strange thing to brag about, but I was really impressed with this. It's a little slower than the first season. Like, it doesn't quite hit the breakneck pace until a couple episodes in. But once it gets going, it's a really good, what I would say, like, entry level kind of scary thing. Like, if you have kids and you're wanting to introduce your kids to something that's got a little bit more bite to it, but you don't quite want to them to watch full on sci-fi or horror yet, like, this show is definitely like perfect, because it's not playing around. Like when they're trying to be scary and tense, they are scary and tense, but at the same time it's not grisly, if that makes sense. There's also a single episode later on that focuses on one whole character that is probably one of my favorite single animated things from like the last year. I loved it. It's like it could have been like if this was a comic book, it would have been a great, how sometimes comic books will like take an issue and like focus on like one particular character. That's what this reminded me of, and it did like a really good job of like just engrossing me and driving right in. So like, I hope this gets a second season. Like Netflix is kind of, or a third season. Netflix is kind of notorious right now for not letting things play out their natural lifespan, and it would be crazy for them to do that with one of the biggest movie franchises in the world. But who knows how they're thinking. But I really dug both the first season and the second season, and continuing my dinosaurs make me happy lifestyle. This definitely hit all those right spots.
Well, that's wonderful. Okay, for me, it's decidedly non-horror, but since we've got Paul Reiser coming next week, not literally, we're watching a movie with Paul Reiser.
Paul Reiser's actually going to film the episode with us.
Yes, wouldn't that be great? That would be cool. I would love to hear from Paul. But anyway,
but he's only going to talk about Mad About You.
Right.
Yeah, that's what Jason's about to
I'm mad about aliens, and I'm mad about you.
I was going to say,
get an interview with him.
Mad About You had a reboot that a lot of people did not see because it was only on Spectrum. It was the weirdest thing. We're Charter Spectrum, which is it is probably the biggest cable company in the United States, but nevertheless, not everybody has Charter. And so if you didn't have Spectrum, you didn't have the Mad About You reboot, which is crazy. It's just wild that that's the way our planet works right now. And so now, a year later, it has come to Amazon Prime. So if you want to see the Mad About You reboot, like 20 years after the original, it's all on Prime. And we shot through it in like 3 days. I mean, it was super fun because it's just so wild to see these actors. I know that I always marvel at this, but it's just really cool to see these actors and have these same roles that they played when they were quite young, and now they're in retirement age, and the plot is about their kids leaving home and so forth.
Not quite
Their great grandson joins the company.
Right. Great stuff. So I recommend it. If you know what, actually, let's put it this way. I only recommend it if you ever watched the original Mad About You. I think if you're too young to have seen the original Mad About You, it seems unlikely that you would be interested in the reboot. But there you go. So, I'm sorry?
You might like the original.
Well, yeah, sure. No, feel free. I mean, Prime has that as well. So if you want to just completely discover a cultural phenomenon that might have escaped you, you can watch the original and then watch the reboot, and that'll be fun. So yes, and next week we get to see a very different side of Paul Reiser than the one I had about you. So cool. Wow, that is our supersized discussion of the movie Alien from 1979. We will be back next week with Aliens by James Cameron. Thank you so much, guys. I really enjoyed talking about this.
I just occurred to me that we did Piranha 2 before we did Aliens. I guess we did Terminator before that, so we haven't completely done wrong by James Cameron.
Any horrible movies that we did before we did Aliens. Maybe, what did Jason say? We're at 326. Maybe 275 movies that we watched where they're not as good as Aliens.
How did we it take us this long to get to the Alien franchise? Holy crap.
I think, again, it goes back to our, doing off the beaten path stuff, and there's so much that's been done about the Alien franchise that it's one of those, hey, I live in New York, I've never been to the Statue of Liberty.
Well said.
I always mean to go, and I know but it's right there. I can see it from the train or what,
Yeah.
And you just
And
I think that's part of it.
I think we're on, given some of the comments about the RoboCop episode, which, by the way, thank you, Sean. That was very kind of you to say that stuff. Nice. I think we're on a good rhythm here with these classic movies. So I'm interested for next week.
Sure. Although I'm looking forward in a few weeks. I don't know when it is going to be, but we're going to do another crossover with the monster movie Happy Hour, and I think it's going to be The House of Long Shadows, which is nobody's idea of a classic movie. I guess it's a classic, but it's not like
Got a lot of classic actors.
It's got a bunch of classic actors, and I have to say, my heart does go pitter patter for a more obscure film that not as much has been said about. There's something exciting about that. But as you can see, when you reach quality like Alien, the fact is we could keep talking about this thing all night. You know, we could just keep picking something and go gender and just start talking, or violence or and just pick something and like spend an hour on that. We could explode this whole conversation, and that's what happens with a quality picture. Which
there's something to be said for the fact that we've done both. I'm not knocking the obscure. Like, I thought it was very kind that one of our viewers thanked us for introducing him to Waxwork. So like, I think there's something to be said about the non-classic movies too. But I do enjoy, getting into these movies that have like a lot of meat to them as far as discussing. Like, I
think, by the way, that was Scott Kelly, who is now the host of the Broadcast podcast, which people should check out, because that's that was a very excellent discussion of Dracula. Anyway, all right, be excellent to one another. Thank you so much for being here, and I will see you guys next week. Bye, everybody.
Good night.
Night.